Hello and welcome to the Crimson Misery Podcast, episode 44. My name is Will Rainbolt. I hope you are doing well. The round of 64 on the men's side has just concluded, and I'm here to talk about it with not a ton to say because honestly, not a ton happened. There are definitely some storylines that I want to get into, and there were some games that definitely were up to par with the whole March Madness slogan, the entire idea that upsets are um, central to the tournament's identity and buzzer beaters and all that stuff, which we did not have. I don't think we had any buzzer beaters in the first round on the men's side. I'll also talk about the opening day for the women's side. There were a couple of games I wanted to get into there. But that being said, if you all are listening on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, consider rating the show 5 stars. If you are listening on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment down below. So let's get right into it. Um, my bracket predictions were not great, um, to say the least. I on the men's side here. Let me look really quickly. So there is a bracket of I think it's the 15th I made on the men's side that has quite a bit correct. I think I only got um yeah, I think I only got two picks wrong in this bracket, which was Kansas over Arkansas, and which Arkansas won, and then Louisville over Creighton. You always have to. I know I said I picked Creighton in my main bracket, but you have to you have to balance it out a little bit. Oh no, I also picked Mississippi State in this bracket apparently. Okay, well, all that being said, I did pick in my main bracket that I did for this podcast. I did pick Creighton and Baylor to move on. There was a lot that I got wrong though, which I will get into right now. So the bracket goes like this. Let's start in the South region. Creighton basically bombarded Louisville with 3-point shots, just overwhelmed them. So, despite being in Lexington, Kentucky, very close to home, did not seem to matter. That's kind of what I had figured, is that Creighton would take advantage of just Louisville's lack of size and lack of perimeter defense, and they did. And it was a crazy, crazy game. Just for the fact that I didn't expect Creighton to shoot that well. But will they keep that up against Auburn? They could. I still have Auburn winning this game, but Auburn, especially in the first half, looked a little vulnerable against Alabama State, but still pulled away in the second half. That's kind of a theme for this tournament, is just pulling away and winning by double digits. Um, just not a ton to say about it. Same with Michigan and Tech. Well, Michigan I have a little more to say about, but Texas A&M pretty much breezed through Yale for the most part, um, which was definitely not what I was not what I was anticipating for sure. Um, yeah, Texas A&M overall, like Yale did attempt to come back in the second half. I believe they cut it down to like two or three at one point. And then yeah, A&M just with Wade Taylor and Anderson Garcia, and Jerk Phillips, all those guys. Pharrell Payne had a really big game just because Yale was not able to do much inside and was not able to guard him inside. So it really was a mismatch that I just thought that the lack of upsets in this tournament, man, have been pretty depressing overall. And kind of the same thing with Michigan, even though I had Michigan winning this game, I had Yale beating A&M, mainly because I thought that A&M was a little too inconsistent, and I just, it felt like such a perfect upset, but unfortunately not. But congratulations to A&M and Michigan for moving on. Michigan had to really fight back against UC San Diego after having a pretty big lead And at that point, everyone was just like, okay, yeah, you see, San Diego is just out of their league. They're in over their head. But and especially when Anawania Tate Jones ended up fouling out, it was like, okay, yeah, they're done. But credit guys like Hayden Gray and what's his face uh yeah, Tyler Magai, who had 25 points in this game. I believe he had also a shot to tie the game, um, which I mean that was a pretty exciting one. Almost a near buzzer beater. That was probably the most exciting game of the first round, or at least the first day. Um, because really, other than that, you didn't have very much. Yeah, so uh, there were a couple teams like UNC Wilmington who kept it close for a while with Texas Tech, and yeah, it really. Other than that, you just didn't have very much. Like Iowa State breezed through. Well, I'll get into that game uh, late because that's technically on tomorrow's radar. But yeah, a couple of the two seeds played. I mean, Tennessee and St. John's both moved on with relatively no problems. I mean, St. John's in the first half struggled a little bit, but in the second half, they just completely dominated. Wisconsin and Texas Tech, as I mentioned before that, both moved on. I had that. Purdue beat High Point relatively easily, although High Point did try to make a game of it. They could not stop Trey Kaufman. It's going to be interesting to see Purdue face McNeese, which I'll get into McNeese in a second. That was one of the few upsets in this first round. McNeese over Clemson. Clemson scored only 13 points in the first half, so that was quite the quite the score there, and yet Clemson they definitely woke up in the second half, but it was way too late. If there were 21 minutes in the second half, then Clemson probably wins this game. But unfortunately for them, their like 4 3-pointers in a row at the end was not to be. And yeah, I just. Uh, I mean, but aside from that, there was just really nothing else really to say. Um, Yeah, McNeese still looks really good. Will Wade can still coach. They're incredibly athletic. Um, Javon Garcia cannot say enough about how clutch he ended up being down the stretch. I believe he blocked like two shots. I forget if it was Shefflin or Zachary for Clemson, but he like blocked a couple shots in a row. So they were making winning plays when Clemson was starting to rally. Um, but and I also just look, I have to say the student manager for McNeese, who's been kind of getting um yeah, Amir Khan. Um, listen, I just feel like it's kind of forced in a way. I don't know if that's necessarily a an unpopular opinion, but like it's like Sister Jean, I bring that up just because it was like she is this very old lady who's like been part of this university and has been part of this like basketball program for so long now. Like I can kind of get it that this is her like moment to shine, but in this case it just feels I like I get it like for different student managers like every like basketball team has a student manager like I just and for some reason I don't know why this guy is necessarily getting like all this attention, I guess. But again, it just to me it just sort of feels forced, but I guess I should probably take it with something that's at least unique for this tournament because the games themselves have not been very unique, so they've just been kind of like they've just been boring. For the most part. I'll get into some of the more exciting games in a second, but still, I just am not on board, or at least I'm not on the bandwagon of the Amir Khan his newfound fame. But I maybe he'll do something to really win me over. I maybe not. So anyway, also yeah, Houston moved on as well. Um, don't have a ton to say about that game. All one seeds, all two seeds, all three seeds, and I believe all four seeds have moved on. And I think all but two fives ended up moving on. So very chalky year. Um, let's move on to the 11-6. VCU lost to BYU. I saw a lot of people picking VCU, and I decided to go with my gut and go with BYU because I thought that was like I thought their shooting was just going to overwhelm VCU, and it did. VCU did attempt to come back after a while, but I mean BYU was really shooting the lights out this game, and I think BYU versus Wisconsin is going to be very, very interesting to see. I have BYU winning against Wisconsin, so we'll see there. And similarly, Drake ups. I mean, another one of the only other upsets that's really like notable was Drake defeating Missouri pretty handily, especially in the second half. Bennett starts 21 points. People are starting to know who he is, especially playing in the Missouri Valley. Obviously, playing in D2 with Ben McCollum at and like but again Missouri I that's another thing I wanted to to mention. Yeah, they played at Northwest Missouri State before transferring with Ben McCollum to Drake, who's 31-3 in his first year at Drake, and maybe his only year. We'll see on that one. But yeah, the SEC was not it did not have a very good time in this first round. I believe since Texas lost in the first four, I believe six SEC teams of the 14 that made the tournament are already out. Um, I believe Missouri, um, Georgia, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, Mississippi State, and Texas. Did I say Texas twice? Wait, let me recap that. So Texas, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, Georgia, Mississippi State, Missouri. Yeah, I think so. So there's still eight SEC teams left, which is a lot, but like it's pretty funny to see quite a bit of the SEC still eat shit this tournament because it's like people. I mean, and I myself included, because like I've talked about like the SEC being pretty good this year, especially I relate that into non-conference play where they were also really good. Um, but at the same time, it's also pretty funny. So, yeah, Missouri just one of the teams that did not have their offenses. The same Missouri team that put up 110 on Alabama and um, was not able to do that here, only putting up 57 points. So very much a whimper that Missouri went out on. And I'll also get into the ACC in a second. But at the same time, well, I've technically already talked about two of the ACC teams in Louisville and Clemson losing. Um, I'll talk about that first. So yeah, with Louisville and Clemson losing, and then North Carolina also losing. I'll get to that game in a second because that was today, which was Friday. Or I'm technically recording this on Saturday morning, but I mean the ACC just sucked outside of Duke. Um, if we're counting North Carolina's win over San Diego State in the first four, they were 1-3. So the ACC went 2-3, or is 2-3 currently, with Duke being the only team still in the tournament. Surprise, surprise. And I want to make this very clear: Duke is one of the best basketball teams of the modern age right now. Like talent wise, they're still really good. They played in one of the worst conferences I've ever seen in Power Five, and like that was reserved for a lot of Pac-12 conferences. Um, I mean, there was a year, I forget if it was 2012. I think it was 2012, where the Pac-12 was so bad that the regular season champion, which that I believe that year was Washington, didn't even make the tournament. That was how bad it was. And I think the tournament runner, like the Pac-12 tournament runner-up, I think was Arizona. They didn't make the tournament either. I believe uh, Colorado and California were the only two Pac-12 teams that year that made the tournament. So that obviously not on that level of terrible, but like in terms of like outside Duke and for how many teams are in the ACC, yeah, that's bad. That's really bad. And I believe I forget the exact year, but like since the tournament expanded to 32 teams, this is I think one of 2 years ever that the ACC has only had one team move on past the round of 64, um, which I mean that's historically bad for this ACC conference. I mean, even your best teams outside of Duke in Clemson and Louisville lose in the round of 64, and that's pretty bad. And North Carolina, obviously, we thought but they always were. They've ended on 1-13 versus quad one opponents, so losing to Ole Miss was not very surprising. Um, and I just don't have much to say about that game because Ole Miss pretty much dominated. North Carolina tried to come back, fell short. It's kind of the epitome of their entire season. I just don't want to talk about the ACC anymore. I consider Duke just to be a completely different part of it. I am glad that I can just put this ACC season behind behind me, behind everyone. Nobody else should have to think about the ACC. That is the hill I will die on. So anyway, um, let's move on to the 7-10 matchups. Um, Arkansas in John Calipari versus Bill Self defeated Kansas 79-72. So Kansas, yo, bro, I heard you were Kansas. I heard you were number one in preseason number one in back-to-back years. One NCAA tournament victory in those 2 seasons. One round of 32 last year and potentially could have been very well been back-to-back round of 64 exits too, because that win against Samford also included a pretty horrible call that screwed over Samford. Um, and yet, at the same time, they still got their asses handed to them against Gonzaga that year. And God, um, despite John Calipari like actively trying to blow this game, um, I mean Arkansas did have Boogie Flan back. He's back for the tournament. Jonas Adu had a fantastic game, 22 points. Tr- Trevon Brazil had 11 points, 12 rebounds. He made very timely shots inside, especially when Kansas went to zone and was trying to slow down Arkansas. John Calipari, there were no flashes to the free throw line. They weren't going in motion. They weren't driving it and then potentially collapsing the zone and then kicking it back out because Kansas has not played zone very much this year. Logic tells you that teams are going to over zone and over collapse on drivers and if especially feeding guys near the high post. So it's like really it was so weird. It's not unnatural because it's John Calipari, but like there was like no adjustment, and Arkansas still won because Kansas, despite having Hunter Dickinson and KJ Adams, um, that was their swan song. Hunter Dickinson, 4 of 13 from the floor. Good job, Hunter Dickinson. I'm glad I never have to see your face on a basketball court ever again. Have fun overseas wherever you go, you clown. Um, anyway, that's oh man, that felt good. Like again, I'm not a fan of John Calipari, obviously, but like it's pretty funny seeing Kansas implode like this. It's our year, guys. This year's definitely not going to be like last year. Last year was, fluke. This year, Bill Self's really going to reel in guys from the transfer portal and make this team more complete. Oh, yeah, you're right, because Kansas sucks even more this year. Good job. You get a you get first place in the Fell For It Again award. Actually, no, 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 no. The first place in the Fell For It Again award are a bunch of Republicans and centrists or whomever that voted for Trump, thinking like again for the third time, thinking he'd actually be beneficial toward them. Um, Instead, active cuts to things like the FAA and Department especially now recently with the Department of Education. Now instead we're gonna actually just be we're just the United States of Israel at this point, because that's who basically rules us at this current time. Yeah, really depressing. So I'm just trying to distract myself uh, with college basketball. So anyway, um, yeah, with because Arkansas definitely played harder, and it really just again was such the epitome of the Hunter Dickinson era. Lazy. Hunter Dickinson in particular, not the other Kansas players, but like, good lord, the dude is like one of the slowest motherfuckers you could ever like prepare yourself to watch. Like, it's in his vertical, he has like a 2-inch vertical. Like, bro, he was never the savior of this Kansas team. And my favorite part of the Hunter Dickinson experience in college was actually when he was at Michigan, right? And he Michigan was playing it at Indiana, Indiana going for the sweep over the Wolverines, and Michigan, it was an overtime, and Michigan had a chance to, I believe, either tie it or win the game. And it may have been Doug McDaniel, um, or whomever it was dribbling up the court, and he like threw a pass to Hunter Dickinson, and Dickinson wasn't looking, and the pass hit him in the back to lose them the game. uh that was pretty funny. And that is the moment from the Hunter Dickinson college basketball experience that I will personally remember the best. So if there's any silver lining for how boring some of the games have been, at least we have that. So yeah, it's time for Kansas to move on from that era. Bill Self is obviously gonna still be the head coach there, even though a lot of Kansas fans want him fired. Um, good luck with that is all I'm saying. So, yeah, that's about all I have to say on that game. But also, we have John Calipari versus Rick Pitino coming up tomorrow, or today technically. Today being Saturday, the 22nd. I'm just making just making that clear. UCLA defeated Utah State 72-47. So the Mountain West, outside of Colorado State and New Mexico, who I'll get into in a second, sucked. Utah State continues to be a tease. I thought Utah State was going to win this game, and boy was I wrong. Boy was I wrong on that one. Yeah. Um. Yeah. I don't think UCLA is getting past Tennessee. I just think they're not that good. Like, they're better than Utah State, but like I just don't trust this UCLA team very much. Although I will say Ademara is really becoming one of the best big guys in the entire country, and I think with even more experience, he's going to be a real problem. So, and then I've already talked about Creighton and Louisville, but Gonzaga absolutely destroyed Georgia, which I was also wrong about. I thought Georgia would have a better shot at Gonzaga, especially with the talent that UGA has. But Gonzaga is way better. And I think Gonzaga versus Houston could be an 8-1 at this point. I felt like Houston could go down and can go down, but we'll see. Gonzaga is going to be a really tough out. Like for an 8 seed, I mean, that's crazy for Gonzaga. Yeah, I mean that's going to be a problem for Houston. So anyway, let's move on to Friday. Duke and Florida both routed their round of 64 opponents. Duke beating Mount St. Mary's and Florida defeating Norfolk State. Wow, who could have seen that coming? Except for literally everyone. Cooper Flag did come back in this one. So Duke will be facing Baylor, who beat Mississippi State. I'll get to that game in a second. Florida defeated Norfolk State. They will take on UConn. Florida and UConn's also going to be a pretty interesting one, even though I do think Florida can win this game, especially because UConn's defense is bad. Um, yeah, Walter Clayton balled out, of course. He's going to be a big problem for UConn and for teams potentially down the line. Both Alabama and Michigan State struggled early on. Robert Morris actually took the lead midway through the second half, and for once I was like, "Oh my God, is Robert Morris going to upset Alabama?" That did not happen. Nate Oates ended up bringing in Grant Nelson, who was not playing just because of his leg injury, but he uh, he came in and made some really big plays down the stretch for Alabama. Um, I wouldn't say he's the only reason why they won. I mean, Mark Sears still hit some big shots, even though the refs have always given him a very, very lenient whistle. He is literally college basketball's version of Jalen Brunson. College basketball has two Jalen Brunsons right now. Uh, Mark Sears and John Tonje of Wisconsin. I'm sure I'm also missing someone else, but yeah, Alabama still really good. I got to give a shout out though. To Amarin Dickerson. That dude's a baller for Robert Morris. 25 points, 9 rebounds, 3 steals. He was making big plays and hit some big shots to help Robert Morris get right back in the ball game. Um, yeah, great effort from Robert Morris. Alabama's though is just way too good. Same with, I mean, Michigan State. I mean, you want the epitome of Michigan State season. Like they started off really, really slowly in this one. Bryant was right in this game, and then Michigan State was like, "Oh yeah, we're really good," and they just went off in the second half. Again, they're a second half team by nature. It's just who they are. Um, after I saw a tweet that Barstool Bryant ended up making, like trolling Cohen Carr. Like, we're supposed to be scared of this guy who only averages uh like what however many points he averages and uh yeah, like less than 10 points per, yeah, 7.7 points and all that stuff. Well, yeah, because he had 18 points in this game. He dunked on your ass a couple of times. Same with Jaden Akins and Jace Richard. I mean, Jace Richardson made some big plays. Trey Holloman hit some big shots. Cohen Carr did, coming off the bench, by the way. Um, yeah, Michigan State is going to be a problem, especially with their depth. So, again, that matchup that they're going to be having with New Mexico is going to be uh, it's going to be something. So, um, and again, I thought Iowa State was going to lose to Lipscomb. Like even without Keyshawn Gilbert, like him out for the year, like Iowa State looked good. Like wow, they looked really good. So I was wrong on that one. Definitely was not expecting that. I was kind of expecting Kentucky to beat Troy. Otega Owe had 20 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. Again, one of my favorite players to watch. And this, like, I can't help but actually, like, kind of, like, I can't believe I'm saying this as an Indiana fan, but, like, especially after the John Calipari era, like, like, Mark Pope is actually kind of likable. And I don't hate, like, this Kentucky team is like pretty like they're actually kind of fun to watch and not that like bad to root for. Um yeah, I just like I mean obviously you have their fans and whatnot and that can be pretty toxic, but like I don't know. I just this team is uh definitely not hateable. Especially compared to Kentucky teams in the past, in the recent past. Um, yeah, I just yeah I don't I don't mind this Kentucky team, I guess, even though I still think Illinois has a pretty good shot at beating them. But I'll get to those games in a second. Maryland and yeah, Maryland destroyed Grand Canyon. Uh, what can I say? The Crab Five, really good. Um, again scoring at an incredible clip, and I'm glad I don't have to think about Grand Canyon until probably next year. I just cannot wait until Grand Canyon is like just kind of obsolete. Arizona, this was a game I got wrong too. I thought Akron would have a pretty good shot at upsetting Arizona because I thought they were overseeded, but good Lord, Arizona came out on fire, uh, winning 93 to 65. I mean, Jaden Bradley had a really good night. Um, Caleb Love had his usual kind of rocky shooting performance, even though he was in comparison to other games he's had this year, it was pretty solid. Um, yeah, KJ Lewis, Carter Bryant, kind of the usual suspects for Arizona. Um, yeah, they were just really balanced scoring attack. Akron just wasn't able to get anything going, especially in the second half, because it was only a 10-point game at halftime. But yeah, definitely got that one wrong. Um, yeah, Akron or Arizona versus Oregon is going to be pretty interesting. The Pac-12 rematch. But again, like no four seed went down this year. Like none of the top four seeds ended up going down, which is like not not something that happens. Usually you have at least like one 13 over 4 or whatever. But in this case it just didn't happen. You had two 12 over 5s and that was it. And yeah, it really there's just nothing there. The other one, I mean, Oregon. Again, I don't have a ton to say about the game against Liberty, also, but also laughing at the Liberty's getting blown out by Oregon, a team that is actually like I just don't like Oregon a whole lot. I don't either Oregon or Arizona. Both teams have like big problems in their offenses, especially. But like I guess give me Arizona. Although like I don't really care either way at this point. Who wins that one? Because I think both teams are going to lose to Duke, but Colorado State handed it on Memphis. Kyan Evans had 23 points, leading Colorado State to the upset, one of the hottest teams in the tournament right now. I don't think Colorado State beats Maryland, but I think they can give them a pretty good game. Um, because their starting offense is actually pretty good. Their starting lineup is actually, they have a lot of scorers, especially, Evans and Clifford, Jalen Lake, Jalen Crocker Johnson. I mean, they have scorers, so they could compete with Maryland's starting five. But I also am like, I I just can't envision Maryland losing this game. Um, yeah, we'll see. But even still, Dane Danger tried his best. Great glow up from where he was at Illinois, but ultimately, um, without without Tyrese Hunter, it was looking pretty grim for Memphis. And Penny Hardaway, of course, is like kind of a meme within the college basketball world. Like, oh my God, we have to rely on Penny Hardaway winning a big game. It's like, yeah. So not incredibly surprising, although Colorado State, I may probably should have seen it. Although I just like my logic in picking Memphis was like just thinking of the Mountain West like choking nearly all the time aside from San Diego State, but that did not happen. So good job on Colorado State. I already talked about North Carolina losing to Ole Miss, which is pretty funny, all things considered. Even though, again, North Carolina tried to come back, but Sean Padula, I believe that was Ole Miss's only three of the second half, but he hit a big three-pointer to basically seal the game. North Carolina, again, as I said earlier, is like 1-13, ends the year 1-13 against quad one opponents. So, um, yeah, that's all I have to say there. So, Illinois routed Xavier. The final score is even closer than how the game actually went. Because my God, aside from Dylan Swain, like Illinois was actually playing pretty well. Um, Illinois has a pretty good shot if they can hit enough threes. They have a pretty good shot to beat Kentucky, and I think they definitely can because they definitely have. At least in with their starters, they have a really good. I think they match up pretty well with Kentucky, especially with how injured Kentucky's been. Um, the question is like the lingering question is that can they hit enough threes against Kentucky's defense? I definitely think they'll be able to. Um, so yeah, with 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 the way this is with the way especially shot against Xavier, I definitely think they'll give Kentucky some problems. And especially with Will Riley, how well he played, and really just how much Will Riley has grown this year. After being very, very inconsistent the first couple months, I really would say like the first 6/10 of the season, he was really inconsistent, and recently he's really caught fire. So I've really liked Will Riley coming in, like especially seeing his highlights from Canada. I was really excited to watch him play. And I'm finally like I'm really excited that he's finally getting some of the recognition that he deserves because that guy's going to be good. So obviously keep an eye on him. St. Mary's in one of the more exciting matchups. St. Mary's had to come back against Vanderbilt. Um, Again, another SEC team that fell. Um, yeah, Vanderbilt was up for quite a bit in this one, and St. Mary's was not shooting the ball very well, but they ultimately, I mean, rebounding wise, they out rebounded Vanderbilt 41-28. That was a big reason why they were able to come back in this one. They hit some timely three-pointers, um, especially with Barrett and Jordan Ross and Augustus Marchelonis. Um, they were finally able to put the stamp on like, yeah, we're actually better than Vanderbilt. And they were in this one. I mean, Vanderbilt made some big shots as well. I mean, Jason Edwards had 18 points, but he also went 2 for 9 from three. Vanderbilt had a couple cracks at it to tie the game after St. Mary's. I believe Mitchell Saxon hit one of no, I no, that was yeah, it was Mitchell Saxon. Yeah, I believe he made one of two to make it a 3-point game, and then Vanderbilt had a couple looks at the looks from three to tie the game, but it didn't go down. I forget who took the last shot. I believe it was McLaughlin because I believe Tyler Nickel ended up getting the rebound or some. I forget who it was, but someone grabbed the rebound and like smartly like drove it in, tried to create a three off a broken play because it was a pretty good look, but it just didn't go down. So, um, yeah, yeah, it was McLaughlin, but yeah, again, the SEC, I think we're going to see this continuing. So, we'll see, but that's w- that's what all I'll say for now. And then New Mexico ended up upsetting Marquette. Um, in a game I really just didn't know which way to go, especially I was considering like both teams um like like New Mexico has had a history in the NCAA tournament of just losing in the first round. That's kind of been their identity for quite a while now. But especially with facing a Marquette team that just isn't made for March, um, yeah, I mean, I probably should have seen it coming, but either way, New Mexico pulled away in the second half and yeah, and played pretty well, all things considered. Like Nelly Jr. Joseph and Donovan Dent, they could potentially give Michigan State some problems. So yeah, they're not as deep as Michigan State, which is kind of worrisome for them, but they have enough offensive firepower with those two guys alone. If True Washington, he might be their X factor because again, New Mexico on the season just doesn't take a lot of threes. They didn't take a lot of threes in this game. Only went 5 of 14, but they are definitely their strength is like going to the rim. Like that is their entire philosophy, and so I think um, I which again is sort of concerning to me because Michigan State is really good and has a lot of interior depth, which sort of makes me think that New Mexico is probably going to have to take a little more threes than they're accustomed to. So I think Marquette would have been a worse matchup for Michigan State overall. But now that this result is coming in, I think Michigan State is going to go to the Sweet 16. But again, that's just my guesstimation. It hasn't happened yet, so we shall see. And then Baylor, and one of the more exciting games happened earlier on. Baylor back and forth battle between Mississippi State. And the reason why I picked Baylor was because of VJ Edgecombe, and he made some really big plays down the stretch. He had a and one that should have probably been an and one. The refs in this tournament have been pretty terrible, all things considered. That's the other thing that I just on a side note. What is the point of Gene Steratore? Like literally, oh, I learned nothing from Gene Steratore. Um, and anytime I do, it's like, is he just saying that for just to agree with the officials? Like, it just seems to be every single time that um that he like agrees with an official's decision or whatnot. Like everyone. It's like the recurring joke of like, yeah, Gene Steratore is not gonna like dispute any sort of call. Um, but yeah, I just it's been a real struggle watching some of the broadcasts, especially for that reason. But oh yeah, the other reason. Side note number two. Good Lord, does Jalen Rose suck as a color commentator? I mean, Lord, that was bad. Not. I mean, I'd honestly say like probably worse than Tom Brady. Um, because good Lord, he was like adding nothing to what Robbie Hummel and Lisa Byington were saying. If it was just Lisa Byington and Robbie Hummel, and or maybe like because Steve Smith, I'm pretty sure was on that broadcast team last year, and like that was a pretty good team. But Jalen Rose is definitely more of a studio guy. He's not necessarily a color commentator, and it showed there because his analysis, quote unquote, was very bare bones. Like he was just kind of repeating what we saw on the play instead of like actually doing analysis, like what any decent like color commentator would do, and like especially in this tournament, like like Grant Hill and Bill Raftery and Jim Spanarkel and Robbie Hummel, of course, Dan Bonner. I mean, you think of like even guys who are kind of annoying to listen to, like Steve Lapis, like they're at least providing analysis, even though I really don't like listening to Steve Lapis, it's just like at least he provides like actual insight into things. Um, and it just also appeared like Jalen Rose wasn't like that prepared. Like he didn't realize what the Maryland starting five's name was, the Crab Five, which is, kind of a play on the Fab Five, which Jalen Rose obviously was a part of at Michigan. But it just like apparently he wasn't aware that was the case. So it's just like, bro, you're calling that game next after the Colorado State Memphis game. It's like, what are we doing here? But yeah, getting back on track, Baylor definitely more talented, I think, than Mississippi State. Just kind of, I mean, Josh Hubbard had a really good game at 26 points, and I believe he had missed. I think he airballed the game tying three, but yeah, Baylor's gonna have a tough time with Duke, but I felt that Baylor was gonna win this game in my bones. Like I didn't get much right so far, but in the 8-9 games, I actually did decently well on those. I think, yeah, the only one I got wrong was Gonzaga, Georgia, but 3 of 4 ain't bad. So in the style of meatloaf. Anyway, yeah, and then Oklahoma, UConn. Um, Oklahoma made it a game. Like they were. I mean, Jeremiah Fears, he and Jalen Moore obviously had some really, really good, had to hit some timely shots and were able to get to the free throw line quite a bit in this one. Oklahoma's 22 of 27 compared to just 13 of 18 for UConn. But Has that experience. They have that tournament winning experience, especially with Alex Karaban. His 1-3 that he hit today was came at a pretty big time when UConn was only up one. So despite the fact that, he only is, I mean, he's shooting a career low this year in 3-point percentage at 35%. But yeah, that shot was pretty timely. But I just think that um, that UConn's going down to Florida. I just don't think their defense is going to be able to match up with Florida's offense. I don't think that's going to happen. I do not think they're going to three-peat, but they at least got a win in this tournament. And Dan Hurley is, of course, a crybaby as he normally is, so that's not really a surprise. Um, but yeah. So today, which is Saturday the 22nd. The round of 32 starts. So that was the round of 64. I'll get to the women's side in a second, but yeah, we have McNeese versus Purdue at 12 at noon, but 12:10 technically, and then Arkansas St. John's, Michigan Texas A&M, Drake Texas Tech, Creighton Auburn. BYU Wisconsin, that is a game I am circling quite. Same with Drake and Texas Tech. There a lot of games are starting pretty late, which is normal. Creighton Auburn, I feel like Creighton could maybe play with Auburn for a half or so, but I think Auburn's probably going to win that game. Gonzaga Houston, another game that is definitely going to be an interesting one to watch. I think, um, yeah, I think oh man, that's tough. That's a tough call, but Gonzaga can give Houston quite a bit of problems. If there is a one that goes down in the round of 32, I think it's Houston with this particular matchup. Tennessee, UCLA. I think Tennessee wins just because I think Tennessee matches up pretty well overall with UCLA. Their defense combined with UCLA's pretty not so great offense is just probably gonna. I feel like Tennessee's gonna probably shut UCLA down pretty easily. I have them moving on. And then Florida, UConn, I think Florida wins. Duke, Baylor, Duke probably wins. Illinois, Kentucky. At this point, probably Illinois, if I had to guess. St. Mary's, Alabama. Even though I want to pick St. Mary's, Alabama's just going to win in some fluky bullshit type way. Maryland, I have over Colorado State. Ole Miss, I could see beating Iowa State, especially if that Kashawn Gilbert injury really impacts their depth. But I just like the way Iowa State played. Like they played really well, but I don't know. I think I'm gonna pick Ole Miss just to have a 6/3 because again just weren't a ton of upsets this time. So I just like really yeah, kind of disappointing. But then I have Michigan State over New Mexico, Arizona over Oregon. Um, so yeah, but I also should say I've Purdue over McNeese, St. John's over Arkansas. In today's matchups, I have Michigan over A&M. Uh, it depends on if Chance McMillan's coming back, if he'll be back. But I'm going to go with Drake. I'm going to go Drake move into the Sweet 16. Yeah, and then BYU over Wisconsin is the other one. So yeah, though that's the round of 32. Um, Very excited to see what happens. We also had the start of the women's tournament. A couple of interesting note. I mean, South Carolina destroyed Tennessee Tech 108-48. That is not a surprise at all. Uh, Joyce Edwards did have a really nice game though at 22 points. Malaysia Fulwiley also played pretty well. That's who Indiana gets to face because Indiana defeated Utah. So yeah, Indiana will not go home this season without a tournament win. So we can always trust Terry Morin, right? But yeah, I was really concerned with that second or with the first half how they were playing, and then Indiana's a third quarter team rather than a first half team or a fourth quarter team because like they always play so well in the third quarter. They tend to keep it pretty close overall, and then they have like some sort of collapse in the fourth quarter. But fortunately, they were able to stave off a comeback by Utah. Maya Torre for Utah was a beast inside at 18 points, 11 rebounds. Um, she was all over the floor. She played really well, but Indiana was able to hit enough shots overall. I also have to shout out a play Chloe Moore McNeeland that made. She made one of the best passes I've ever seen in a basketball game, like genuinely. Um, she like passed it full court down to Shea Chesky, who was running down the floor. She had a really good game, by the way, 16 points overall. Um, but Indiana's going to have to shoot a lot better. I mean, and also, yeah, Chesky was going for a layup. But just a beautiful pass that they got to her. So, um, but yeah, Indiana's gonna have to do a lot better than 5 of 17 from three in order to have any shot with Wisconsin. What the hell am I talking about? South Carolina. A little bit of a difference there with South Carolina. Yeah, I just think South Carolina is probably going to win that one pretty handily. Although it is pretty funny that Indiana and South Carolina are rematching from last year's Sweet 16, where Indiana gave South Carolina the closest game of their tournament run. So yeah, that's that game, and then UCLA destroyed Southern. Well, wow, what a shock! Lauren Betts, still really good. Really, what else is there to say? TCU and Duke both won their matchups. TCU, not a surprise. They're just a really well balanced team, easily defeated Fairleigh Dickinson. Duke did not have repeats of 2012, where Duke was upset by CJ McCollum and Lehigh. Duke wins 86 to 25. Good Lord. Um, yeah, Lucia Akinanwa had 15 points to 7 rebounds. I think she had like 3 or 4 steals in this one. Toby Fournier also had a pretty solid game, but the story is like not only did Duke hold Lehigh to under 10 points in each quarter, but Lehigh scored 2 points in the second quarter, which is really, really wild. Really wild stuff. And then Notre Dame defeated Stephen F. Austin 106 to 54. Not much of a surprise there. Notre Dame definitely got back on track with that one, putting up over 100 points. Kentucky barely held on at home against Liberty. That was a really big surprise, especially because Kentucky looked really good in the first half, but man, Liberty with a fierce comeback in that one. Yeah, I just was really surprised. Georgia Amore had 34 points. I believe that was closing in on a Kentucky like women's basketball record for points in a tournament game. Um, but I was really surprised to see how close it was, and I still think Kentucky ends up beating Kansas State, but still, that was a pretty close one. Pretty close call. So we'll see. Um, I just think Kentucky matches up pretty well with Kansas State, but we shall see. Baylor defeated Grand Canyon again. I'm glad I don't have to worry about Grand Canyon for at least another year. Um, yeah, Aaronette Vonleh, sister of Noah Vonleh, of course, had 25 points, 11 rebounds in that one. One of the best players to watch in this tournament, one of the most underrated players in this tournament field to watch as well. Ohio State had a little bit of trouble with Montana State, but ended up winning 71 to 51. It'll be interesting to to see that game against Tennessee because Tennessee put up 101 points against South Florida. And I have Tennessee beating Ohio State and moving on quite a bit. So we'll see with the way Ohio State ended up playing today. Like that could happen, but it depends on which Tennessee shooting team shows up, of course. But it was a really, really good game for them. Uh, yeah, I'm really, really excited to see what ends up happening there. And then um, Kansas State and Ole Miss both ended up winning pretty easily. Not really surprised. Michigan ended up defeating Ohio State, or Iowa State, rather. Sorry. Um, the three-headed monster of Olivia Olson, Silas Swords, and Jordan Hobbs are going to be really tough to deal with for Notre Dame, and that's not going to be an easy game. I think Notre Dame probably wins, but like Michigan's going to give them a pretty good game overall. Like starting three freshmen. I mean, Kim Barnes. Kim Barnes. Arik, is that how you say your name? Uh, Kim Barnes. Yeah, Kim Barnes Arico. Yeah, she is like she took a gamble on starting a pretty young team and is still like getting results. And Michigan's going to be pretty scary in years to come because good Lord, especially Silas Swords and Olivia Olson. Good God, those they're really good. And Jordan Hobbs being kind of the senior leader that they've needed. Um, this team's really well balanced, and unfortunately, Audie Crooks is gone from this tournament now. But um, we will not forget you. Audie Crooks had 28 points and 7 rebounds. Oregon had to beat Vanderbilt in overtime, 77-73. Another game that I was pretty torn on because I wasn't very impressed with Oregon throughout the year, but they were able to beat Vanderbilt. So very in overtime. So I was very surprised to see that, but congratulations. I guess that's another win for the Big Ten. Nebraska couldn't do the same thing though, because Louisville ended up winning 63-58. Again, I wasn't impressed with Louisville again throughout this year, so this was another pretty decent surprise. But Louisville's defense really showed up in this one, um, especially in a back and forth second half where um, Alexis Markowski really couldn't get going. Really, no one on Nebraska could get going in this one. So, um, yeah, I definitely was a little surprised to see Louisville win, but um, maybe not. I mean, they were the higher seeded team for a reason, but um, yeah, definitely was not my pick. I've already talked about Indiana, Utah, and then Richmond defeated Georgia Tech. So Georgia Tech season comes to an end. Maggie Dugan, 30 points, 15 rebounds, 6 assists, just dominated this game. So Richmond is going to have their hands full with UCLA, but if she can get going against UCLA, um, that would be a pretty cool matchup, honestly. So yeah, and then a lot of other games that are happening tomorrow. It'll be interesting to see Florida State and George Mason, Creighton, Illinois as well. Uh, Harvard, Michigan State is going to be a game that we definitely should be circled. Um, yeah, I'll be interested in quite a few of these matchups. So, yeah, I think I think that'll do it for this episode. Um, but yeah, I'm really excited to see what ends up happening in the round of 32, what happens in the rest of the women's side this weekend and on Monday. So yeah, it has not been a great not has not been a great field so far. Maybe the round of 32 will make up for it, but man, it's just missing sort of the spice, the pizzazz, the upsets, the buzzer beaters, the standout performances. Like we just haven't really gotten too much of that, It's just sort of been kind of standard so far. But even still, maybe the next few rounds will make up for it. Maybe we'll have just a classic Final Four. We'll see. I'm not holding my breath on that, but I've been wrong before, so we'll see. And yeah, thanks again for listening. I will see you all probably either Sunday or Monday, whenever we'll see. But anyway, have a good time watching the round of 32, if you dare, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.